Hey, what's going on everyone on YouTube? So I'm working on the 2010 Scion XB. If you've seen my previous video on testing the battery, we found out the battery was good. However, the alternator was faulty, so it's not charging the battery. So in this video right here, I'm gonna show you how to remove the alternator, replace it, install a new one, and we'll go from there. But before we remove the alternator, we're gonna have to disconnect the battery. So let's start with that first. So let's remove the negative terminal first. A lot of people just like to remove the negative and that's it. I like to do both just in case. That's just my preference. And there we go. Fully disconnected. Now we can start working on the alternator. Okay, so I have the serpentine belt tool, and it's the OEM brand, and it's 27115 if you're interested. And this is what it looks like. I got this at Autozone. So there you go, right there. So unfortunately, this didn't work very well for me. Not that the tool is bad or nothing. It's just because the motor mount's in the way. I was struggling to remove the tension off the belt. But I'm going to show you a trick that I figured out. So this is the alternator, the position of the alternator, and you can see the belt there. And then you see my wrenches right here. And I'm going to show you how I did this. It's just much easier for me. I have more room to work with. Okay, so what I did, I used a pipe onto the wrench to help me give some leverage so I can loosen up that belt. Okay, so belt's already loose. Gently release the tension on the belt tensioner. You can see the wrench is still in place. That worked better for me than using the belt tension serpentine belt tool. Okay, so now we're gonna have to unplug the alternator. So I just have a pry bar, smaller pry bar. You can use a screwdriver, flathead, whatever works for you. And you're just gonna pull up on the cap so you can expose, so you can have the battery nut there for the alternator. Now here, there's a plug, and there is a tab. Press onto the tab right here where my finger is located, and it just comes right off, very easy. Now we have to unplug this one over here. So I'm going to use my finger, press on the tab, it comes right off. Now I'm going to need a 10 metric to remove this bolt that secures this harness, and then we can start removing the alternator. Okay, so now we're going to remove the bolt. There we go. And now we're going to remove the nut that secures the battery wire. Now everything's easy to remove. The harness stays in place. It's just easy now. We have more clearance to work with the alternator. Now we have to remove the securement bolts that secures the alternator. So we have to remove this bolt right here. And there's going to be another one at the bottom. I'm not going to be able to give you footage on that one. Okay, again, I can't give you a good footage on the bottom bolt, but it's a size 12, and I'm using a long socket here so I can break loose and remove that bolt. Okay, the bolt's already out. Again, it's a size 12, and it's literally underneath the alternator. Now we have to remove this bolt here. Okay, so we're using a socket 14 metric. We're loosening that up. There we go. Now we can take the alternator off. And there it is. So there goes the alternator right there. Now let's replace it with the new one. Alright. So this is the first time I've dealt with this before. So most of the time when I have to replace an alternator, I gotta remove the original pulley and put it onto the new alternator. But it already came with one, and it's the correct size. So I just removed the cap because I was just curious what it is. And you need a special tool for that right there, in my opinion. So good thing it came with the new alternator pulley. I'll put the part number on the description below, just in case. I got this at AutoZone. Okay, new alternator is going back in its place. Gotta get that longer bolt in there. Let it hang there for a minute. Now I'm gonna have to figure out and feel for the low one since I can't even see it myself. Okay, that lower one's a little tricky if you're not used to doing this all the time. Even for me, that I've been doing this for quite some time, it was a little tricky. So you have to install that bolt through a hole, and then after that bracket of that hole is where the bracket of the alternator casing is located at. So you just gonna have to wiggle until you can get that bolt in there right. And again, just have some patience. It can be frustrating for some people. All right, now it's tight. The alternator is secured. Now let's plug everything back up. So the first thing I'm gonna do is install this plug. I'm gonna install the battery cable for the alternator. Also, you always want to double check and make sure your connections are clean. In this case, this one is, so I ain't worried about it, but I definitely want to address it just in case. Now, you don't want to put a lot of torque on this, so it's already tight, it's good, secured. Now we're going to install the other plug. Everything's good. Now we're going to install the bracket for the wire harness. Let's get that wrench in there, or ratchet, tighten that up. Now let's install the belt. Alright, so now I'm getting the belt back in place. Almost there. It is a little difficult if you don't take off this motor mount, but I definitely didn't want to mess with that. Okay, so I'm having a difficult time putting on this belt because the original position was right here and the open end of the wrench was hitting the frame already. So since it's stuck, that helped me out to reposition the wrench, and then I can adjust the tensioner a little bit more to my advantage. Okay, securely in place. Gonna use the pipe again and push down on that wrench. Yeah, oh yeah, it's a lot better. There we are, we're in. So what I'm doing here, just gonna use the pry bar just to align that belt on the idle pulley, and we're good. Everything's installed properly regarding the belt, so we're good to go. Now let's test. All right, alternator is already secured, plugged up properly, and the belt's already installed properly. Now it's time to install the battery cable. So let's start off with the positive side first. It's very secured, excellent. Now the negative cable, and it's tight. Now we're gonna test the alternator or the charging system and see if it's charging properly. Okay everyone, so now the engine's running. Place the positive lead to the positive post, negative lead to the negative post. Now let's get to the multimeter. So we want voltage DC, and we're getting a reading of 14.2 volts. That's excellent. In my previous video, you'll notice that was at 12.12 volts. That means that the alternator wasn't charging. The 12.12 volts were just coming from the pure battery. So we took care of the problem. Charging system's working good, and this vehicle is ready to roll. All right, so we're done already repairing this vehicle and this charging system, fixing it. I want to say thank you to my son Elias for helping me out with this video. I had some help this time. That's pretty cool. So if you have any questions, any comments, write them down below. I'll get to them as soon as possible. See ya.